Hello everyone, my name is Terry Maguire. I'm the Director of Ireland's National Forum for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. I'm really sorry that we didn't get to meet each other face to face in Nuremberg, but I thought I'd put together some of what I would have said in this short video. But first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the National Forum. National Forum was set up in 2013, and it actually has developed to being the national body responsible for leading and advising on teaching and learning and enhancement in Irish higher education. Our vision we really work towards is that at some stage we'll have a valued and informed teaching and learning culture across our higher education sector. We talk about our work in terms of 4 strategic priorities: the professional development of those who teach, teaching and learning enhancement within and across disciplines, and we support and focus on the discipline as an actual unit of change. Teaching and learning in a digital world. And altogether, we all support student success. But we do this recognising the policy context within which we work, knowing that we have to be informed by and inform policy, recognising the higher education context and the individual context of each one of our institutions. But most importantly, we recognise people. People run systems and people run institutions and people design programs. And teachers are people and our students are people. So very much the ethos of the National Forum is that we believe in our people. We believe that the potential to enhance teaching and learning already exists within the higher education sector, and our role is to respect, nurture, and to support that. And we've learned a lot over the last few years about how to support enhancement. There's too much anecdotal evidence. So we know that where we have to start from is a very strong evidence base. We know that we need to disrupt the usual conversations, and we need to generate national momentum and interest to really get change to happen. We've got to learn from our past experience. We've already invested a lot of money in teaching and learning, and we've got to look very carefully at what actually has worked and why, and build on that. We've got to foster system and sectoral level change. If the institutions themselves change, that's not sustainable change long term. If the system changes, that's not sustainable change long term. To really get a change to happen, we all have to work together and we've got to change together. But there's no academic ownership without academic leadership. And the National Forum has an academically led board. But on that board also sits the representative associations for our different institutional types. Students from the Union of Students of Ireland, are persons that are responsible for quality, and our policy makers. And together, that makes the decision making really, really strong. What I thought I'd do is actually to be brave enough to look to the future. The National Forum has this habit of talking about 10 things we must do or 10 things we've learned. So I thought I'd do 10 predictions about higher education in 2030. The first prediction is that the voice of students in higher education is going to be much stronger, and student partnership is going to underpin all aspects of teaching and learning. Over the last number of years, we've already seen a strong movement towards this. Students are no longer passive recipients of education. They're involved at all levels in terms of the decisions that we take. They sit on the quality review boards. They sit at the highest levels within our institution. I think that's going to continue. And I think students are going to actually shape the very nature of higher education. The National Forum is renowned for its commitment to students. Students sit on our board. Students work with us as equal members of our team, helping us to decide what we should be doing. We work with the National Student Engagement Programme to help build leadership capacity within our students. We support the National Student Survey of Student Engagement to ensure that our institutions have an evidence base that to be able to make informed decisions. We're disrupting where the students are actually placed and where their decisions and where their input is actually considered in higher education. We work with students in partnership. The second prediction that I'm going to make is that higher education pathways will become really flexible and people will be engaged in formal higher education as and when they want to do it. And it's going to be much less linear. There's going to be a much bigger connection between all levels of education, between further education and higher education. And I think we're going to have tried at least to put that seamless experience for our students in place. At the moment, we still consider further education students our students and higher educations as higher education students. But they're people on a journey. We just support them at different times. I think we will be thinking differently. We won't be thinking linearly about going up through the levels of qualifications, level 7, level 8, level 9, level 10. I think if we were to look at what qualifications look like, they might look more like interconnecting pathways with lots of linkages, lots of stopping off points, lots of crossing over points. I think there's going to be an unbundling of our higher education. I think we're going to have much smaller, shorter pieces of learning available. I think micro-credentials are going to be much bigger. I think we'll be using things like digital badges to recognise learning that's taking place. And the National Forum has already explored some of this. In 2016, we launched a National Professional Development Framework for all those who teach. And we looked across the sector at the kinds of professional development, the kinds of opportunity for engaging in professional development that existed within the sector. We agreed a typology for professional development. But the other thing that we agreed is that we need more than just accredited programs to get our own staff who teach engaged in professional development. So we developed an interface called opencourses.ie, where we developed short 25-hour courses that lead to a National Forum digital badge. These have proved to be very, very popular across the sector. Staff can engage in them face-to-face, they can engage in them with self-study, or they can engage in line. I think this is the kind of learning for the future. My third prediction is that higher education institutions will have an increased focus on learning environments and the student learning experience. You know, there's been an awful lot of emphasis put on national student surveys and student-centred learnings over the last number of years. And what's that done is actually given institutions the kind of a sense that they have to market themselves in some way. And sometimes what they're marketing isn't necessarily supporting student success. We've done a lot of work around student success. This is the icon that we use. Looking at this icon, you can see it's an acorn with the potential to grow into a huge oak tree. And our higher education sector has got to nurture and help every one of our students to reach their potential, just as an oak tree grows. So we asked, a few months ago, we asked our students, well, what would you like institutions to do to actually support your success? There wasn't a whole lot in there about posh swimming pools. There was a lot in there about teaching. There was a lot in there about the sense of belonging. Mental health is there. Yes, facilities are there, but they're not the most important thing. And I think we need to remember that. The fourth prediction I'm going to make is that data is going to be a key resource for supporting student success. So I asked one of my team that leads on the work we're doing in Ireland what I was going to say. And he came up with a haiku. Telescopes don't see, they let people look beyond. Data does this too. I really hope that in 2020 we don't have a data-driven approach to what we're doing in our institutions. I hope it's student-centred. I hope it's data-enabled. And I hope we remember that data isn't a magic wand. It's just a tool for us to use appropriately. And I hope we do that. My fifth prediction is around digital. Now what I'm saying here is I hope by 2030 we'll have dropped the digital bit and that we'll be just talking about teaching and learning because we'll have technology embedded appropriately in all our approaches. I think what's happened in the last couple of weeks will have a big impact for that. I don't think our higher education sector is ever going to be the same again. But I think that the momentum of this crisis is going to bring real change. One of the things that we'd done last October is we had actually worked with our sector, who volunteered to actually join us in a national survey of digital experience. And this survey went out to every institution, every staff member who taught, and every student in Irish higher education. And the tagline's really important. It says, let's see where we are so we can build our future together. 25,000 students responded to the survey and nearly 5,000 staff. And we have a huge evidence base now to be able to inform what we're doing once this crisis is over. But one of the things we learned in the survey, we learned a lot about what the learning and teaching practices that are currently happening within our institutions, the attitudes of our staff and students to digital. We learned how our institutional infrastructure was supporting digital. We learned the opportunities that staff and student had in decision making, and we learned the environment and culture that surrounded it. But we also learned that the majority of our staff had never taught online. The majority of our students had not experienced the online environment. That's all changed now, and it changed within 72 hours. And I suppose I have a bit of a concern that if this is the first experience of many of our staff and students in the online environment, that they don't think that talking heads in webinars is a real online experience. And I think we have to do a lot of work to ensure that that doesn't happen. My sixth prediction is that there'll be an increased focus on open education. And I mean, the whole environment around open is being pushed. It's been underpinned by public justice, social justice. It's been pushed to ensure that public funded outputs are available for the public good. We've already seen a lot of it around research, and more we're going to see it around teaching and learning. But we have to help our sector to actually develop the capability and the understanding around open teaching education practices, policies and approaches. And the National Forum is actually supporting this work in Ireland through our own work. In 2015, we produced a complete review of open education resources across the sector. We followed that up with an open licensing guideline. Everything we fund, everything we support has got to be open, but we support our sector in understanding what that actually means. My seventh prediction is around graduates' transversal skills and how they're going to impact on what we do in higher education. In Ireland, we've certainly seen a move in all our undergraduate programmes to incorporate work-based learning. And I think work-based learning and that opportunity to have the experience, real experiences in the workplace, is a potent tool to develop the kinds of transversal skills that we want to see in our graduates. One of the things that the Forum has done is that it's ran almost a 2-year enhancement programme around assessment, where we started conversations about how we can push from assessment of learning much more towards assessment for and as learning, which are very important in this area. One of the biggest drivers that's in Ireland is going to be the 60 million budget that the government has just announced over the next 5 years to support our human capital initiative. There isn't an institution in our country at the moment that isn't writing applications to try and get some part of that big pot. But if you look at the objectives of the human capital initiative, it's about ensuring that there's greater focus on the whole spectrum of higher education course provision and promoting and embedding transversal skills. And yes, it's also around digital. But this is going to be a huge driver for change in making our curriculums more agile, in being much more proactive rather than reactive, in being able to turn curricula around much quicker. And I think it'll be something to really closely watch. My eighth prediction is that there's going to be an increased focus on sustainable development in higher education. And that's already started. Higher education institutions are already looking at the sustainability goals. Our future students are pushing this. They've been globally vocal that they want change. It's interesting the National Forum hadn't done a whole amount of work on this until this year. And it's not surprising that our partners, the Union of Students of Ireland, approached us to help work in this area. So together we're going to do some systematic research in our higher education sector to capture how sustainability has already been embedded in our curriculum and across our disciplines. I've no doubt that that work is going to create some interesting conversations, certainly in Irish higher education. My nice prediction is that there's going to be an increased appreciation for the importance of teaching and learning and a more balanced relationship with research. The current crisis has actually shone a light on teaching and learning in Irish higher education. Up to now, teaching and learning has been like wallpaper. You don't notice it and it starts to peel. But the COVID virus has actually made teaching and learning visible within our institutions. It's also made it increasingly clear how ready we were or not to be able to provide quality, accessible teaching and learning opportunities to our students. Maybe this is a good opportunity to redress the balance between teaching and research. What about if we think about accountability that matters? An emphasis on accountability and value that's meaningful for everybody. If we think about what we value, if we think about how we value it, and we all agree, maybe we'll be able to have a better higher education environment for our students. But how do we agree how you value it? Well, Ireland, in partnership with the sector, has actually just started a consultation. The consultation is valuing Ireland's teaching and learning, and we're doing it because it's vital. We're going to work with our institutions to actually get a picture of how we currently value teaching and learning in Irish higher education. Ideally, how we could value it. And we're going to find out what influences how we value it, how we value teaching and learning. We'll negotiate a way forward. And maybe by 2030, we'll have accountability that matters. My final prediction is that there's going to be more and deeper debates about the value of higher education and the value of learning itself. That institutions will be thinking about themselves much more. One of the things that the COVID virus has done is it actually highlighted and brought into open debate learning and education like never before. Here in Ireland, we have had such changes in such a short time. In less than 72 hours, our higher education system went online. Assignments are being cancelled or they're being changed. The Irish Mammies institution, the Holy Grail, the Irish Leaving Cert, have been impacted in ways that we never thought possible. And when all this is over, it's going to raise real questions about education and about the nature of learning itself. And I think institutions need to be reflecting on this. As Barnett says, institutions need to think about themselves. So I think if institutions do think about themselves and they do think about how they want to go forward and they find as yet a future that's not even described, but one that actually really and truly supports student success. But what's student success? Well, actually, we've done a lot of work on that. We know that student success is facilitated through meaningful partnership and engagement between students and staff and between all levels of higher education. We know we have to empower our students to recognise and achieve their own potential. We have to remove all the obstacles that hinder students for achieving their own benchmark of success. In a way, our systems and institutions have to get out of their way. Success isn't binary and we can't be encapsulated in metrics such as retention or progression rates. We need to reframe the perspective from product to process, from KPIs to quality enhancement. We need whole of institution solutions. It's too highly nuanced and individualised to be concisely defined. We've got 250,000 students in Irish higher education, and each one of them would define student success differently. But although we can't define it, we can understand it, and we can use that understanding to shape what we do. So our national understanding is that student success optimises the learning development opportunities for each student to recognise and fulfil their potential to contribute to and flourish in society. To be achieved, this requires a culture in Irish higher education that values inclusivity, equity and meaningful engagement between students, staff, their institutions and the wider community. And if over the next 10 years, every time you're in your institution and you're making a decision, I want you to think about student success. I want you to encourage your colleagues to think about student success. Is what I'm doing or thinking about doing really going to support student success? And maybe then, when my 70-year-old self looks at this video in 2030, I won't hang my head in shame and wonder why I got this so wrong. Thank you very much.